Let me ask you something. ¿Cuántas palabras conoces en español? How many words do you know in Spanish? As this is a course for complete beginners, we are in Unit 0, starting almost from scratch. I imagine you don't know many words, or at least that's what you think. But what if I told you you might be familiar with already hundreds, even thousands of words? But before diving in, a reminder that we are now in Module 0 of our course for beginners here on YouTube, where we are just learning some basics to get started. After learning about the greetings and some listening practice, the alphabet, and in the last lesson, useful questions to avoid getting stuck in a conversation asking for clarification, now it's time for the last lesson of this introductory module, which is, as mentioned, cognates. Make sure to check out the full playlist here on our YouTube channel and subscribe to get the future lessons of this course. Cognates are words in your native language that share the same origin as words in another language. Therefore, they are much easier for you to understand and to learn. Funny enough, cognate itself is a cognate. So the word in Spanish is cognado, and as you can see in the dictionary of the Royal Academy, it comes from Latin cognatus. If we check the Collins Dictionary of English for the same word, cognate, you see from Latin cognatus. And we're going to learn these cognates in three categories. The first ones are perfect cognates, which are the easiest to learn because they are identical in both Spanish and English. Then we have near perfect cognates, which are very, very similar, but you need to learn a certain rule, certain formula, so you can make them work. And then false cognates. These are tricky, and they lead you to think that the word in Spanish and English is the same, but it is not. Starting with perfect cognates, we can see here two good examples. Chocolate in English is chocolate in Spanish. Animal is animal. So as you can see, identical spelling. If you see this word chocolate or animal in a text or you hear it, you're very likely to recognize it as what it is. But we need to be careful with these perfect cognates because even these are not so perfect. There are some pronunciation changes and even some minor spelling changes. For example, the word professor, it's in Spanish profesor, but in English you have two S's. In Spanish this is not the case. You never have two S's. That does not exist. So you will have one S. So there are very minor spelling changes, but overall they are identical words. With the pronunciation though, you do need to pay attention. First with the stress like animal, animal, and second with vowels specifically. Remember, if you haven't already, make sure to check out our pronunciation lesson on the alphabet where we cover vowels in a bit more detail. Just as a reminder, they are A, E, I, O, U. And you can see how chocolate, the pronunciation in Spanish, chocolate, requires different sounds for the vowels. With that in mind, let's look at this word, professional. Now, instead of me giving you the solution to things and the rules directly, we're going to follow an inductive approach. We covered that in the course introduction, that we follow an inductive approach to grammar, and this means that we ask you to infer the rule first before being introduced to it. This reinforces the way you learn it. It creates a much stronger connection when you are first asked to think by yourself and then are presented with the rule. So that's the structure we're going to follow in this lesson and in future lessons too. So how do you say professional in Spanish? ¿Cómo se dice professional en español? Es profesional. ¿Y cómo se dice traditional en Spanish? Tradicional. Last one. ¿Cómo se dice digital en español? Digital. So if I show you this, professional is profesional, traditional is tradicional, digital is digital, then what can you conclude from this? So we can infer from this that words ending in al in English are identical in Spanish. We need to be careful though, as we have seen with professor before and now professional. There are some spelling changes that you need, like the double S to one S or two Fs with one F, and also tion to the tion, because we don't have the tion sound in Spanish. And the intonation is also different. It's not professional, it's profesional. Now, we're not going to cover all of the cognates and cognate rules in this video. This will be too long. But let me show you very briefly all the rules to infer these perfect cognates, aside from al ending. You also have tion, sion, like decision, decisión. Words ending in or, like professor, professor in English. Words ending in ble or ble, possible, posible. AR ending, popular, popular, and ion ending, opinion, opinion. And now we can move on to the next category, the second one of near-perfect cognates. But before we do that, if you are enjoying this video, please give it a like, dale a me gusta. Es gratis, okay? It's free. So now let's move on. Here are two examples. Artist in English is artista en español. Celebration is celebración. So as you can see, now there are some changes. They are not spelled exactly the same, but they are very, very, very close. So let's look again at examples, and then you can infer some rules, I'm sure. Now, ¿cómo se dice authentic en español? If you don't understand when I say ¿cómo se dice?, it's because you have not watched the previous lesson of the course where we teach you about some questions to ask for clarification. ¿Cómo se dice is how do you say something? So, ¿cómo se dice authentic in español is how do you say authentic in Spanish? Well, it's auténtico. What about basic? Básico. And public? Público. Seeing these three examples, authentic, auténtico, basic, básico, public, público, what's the rule here? What's the rule for the cognates, the near-perfect cognates? Words that in English end in IC, in Spanish end in ICO, ICA. Is this always the case? Unfortunately, not. Life is not so easy. You have false cognates such as fabric is not fabrica because they mean different things. Fabric is tela in Spanish, and fabrica means factory. And another reminder regarding the pronunciation, as you see, basic, authentic, the intonation in Spanish is auténtico, básico, and they always have an accent mark in the third from last syllable of the word. Let's take a look at another rule. Diary in Spanish is what? Diario. What about salary? Salario. And vocabulary? Vocabulario. Therefore, we can infer what? Saying this, diary, diario, salary, salario, vocabulary, vocabulario. That words ending in ar in English and in ario in Spanish. And another exception, temporary, very common mistake, is not temporario, is temporal. And let's take a look at the last rule for these near-perfect cognates that we are going to introduce in this video. How do you say communication in Spanish? ¿Cómo se dice communication en español? Comunicación. Education is educación. And pronunciation, pronunciación. Therefore, what's the rule for near-perfect cognates in this case? Words ending in tion in English and in tion in Spanish. And this rule is particularly useful because you can even extract more value from it. So if you just grab these words that end in tion in Spanish, take out the tion and add an R, you have the verb of the word. For example, for comunicación, the verb is comunicar. For educación is educar, pronunciación, pronunciar. So you have also not only the noun, but also the verb from most of these words that end in tion. Now that you know the perfect cognates in Spanish and English and very useful rules for near perfect cognates, let's take a look at an example of the value that cognates have as well as their limitations. And remember, in these lessons, I expect you to be active, to not only passively watch the videos, but interact with me and respond when I ask. No seas vago. No seas vago. Don't be lazy. So I'm going to show you a sentence here, and I want you to try to give me the translation of the full sentence. I'm going to give you some parts of it that are a bit more tricky. The professor teaches us pronunciation and basic vocabulary. Teaches us would be nos enseña, and the conjunction and is y in Spanish. But can you give me the rest of the sentence? I'm sure you can. Okay, el profesor nos enseña pronunciación y vocabulario básico. So you can see two things here. The first one is that, well, cognates are very useful. There are many of them, and you were able to form this sentence just by using the rules you have learned. Profesor, profesor, pronunciation, pronunciación, basic, básico, vocabulary, vocabulario. But also you can see that it's not enough because there are other things you need to be aware of. The placement of adjectives in Spanish sometimes is different than in English. Basic vocabulary is not básico vocabulario, but it's vocabulario básico. And so far, most of the cognates I introduced are nouns, which means that you not only need to know that professor is profesor, or that pronunciation is pronunciación, but you need to know that professor is the masculine form, el profesor, and the feminine will be la profesora, and that pronunciation is a feminine word, and it's la pronunciación. This is to say that cognates are very useful, very great, this first step or introduction, and a fantastic way of seeing how many words you already know. And it will help you understand when you read and listen to these words, as well as to guess properly most of the time when you don't know how to say something, but use your English knowledge, right? The English language as a starting point. But there is much more to it. Even if you have a list of 1,000 words that you already know, there is also the proper way of using them in the right context, with the right form, in the right gender. So it's not as easy, but it's a very, very useful tool. And to finish off with cognates, let's dive into ones that we need to be careful with. These are false cognates, words that may lead us to believe that words in Spanish are said in a certain way or mean a certain thing, but it's quite different. The best example, maybe you have heard about it, is the word embarrassed in English. Does not translate to embarazada. Embarazada in Espanol means pregnant. So you, I'm sure, don't want to confuse those two words. And to be embarrassed would be estar avergonzada or avergonzado. Another one is like the verb to realize. Very common mistake among my students. They want to say, oh, I realized something, or realicé algo. Not quite. Realizar in Spanish is to accomplish or to perform, to carry out something. To realize would be darse cuenta. Quite different. And also, if you read the word pie in Spanish, right, as you see it written here, you may be tempted to think that it's pie in English, but no, the sound is very different and the meaning is too. Pie means foot. As mentioned before in the lesson, we are not going to cover today all of the cognates, all of the rules, and all of the false cognates. Otherwise, this video will be too long. However, we do have something for you. As part of our Spanish Beginner Kit, which is a set of resources perfect for someone that is getting started with Spanish, you can see in the Learning Vocabulary section a list of cognates that you can download in PDF format. There's almost 80 pages with all of the rules, both for perfect cognates and near perfect cognates. You can click and see, for example, tion, ción, and see relación, situación, información, as well as the use in context with the sentence and its translation. And also in this same list, you can see the false cognates with lots of them. So if you want to take a look at this much more complete list, make sure to download our kit for beginners. You will find the link in the description of the video, and it's completely free. And with this, we finish this lesson on cognates, and also this puts an end to Unit 0 of our course for beginners here on YouTube. If you want to get notified when we publish our next lesson, already in Unit 1, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell. We are publishing new lessons every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I hope you enjoyed so far. Remember, if you did, give it a like, dale a me gusta, which is completely free. Es gratis. Soy Alejandro de Key Spanish y nos vemos en clase.